Marcus stared at his phone, reading the same message for the 10th time. "I think we should just be friends." 3 months of what he thought was a genuine connection had ended with a single text. At 29, this wasn't his first experience with modern dating's brutal unpredictability, but it was the moment he finally asked himself the question that would change everything. What am I fundamentally misunderstanding about how this all works? What Marcus was about to discover, and what millions of men worldwide are struggling to comprehend, is that modern relationships operate according to psychological principles that have been largely hidden from male understanding. These aren't manipulative secrets or gender conspiracies, but fundamental truths about human psychology, attraction, and communication that our culture has failed to teach men effectively. The renowned psychologist Jordan Peterson has spent decades studying the intersection of evolutionary psychology, human behavior, and modern social dynamics. His research reveals that many men today are operating with an outdated psychological map, trying to navigate a completely transformed dating landscape using strategies and assumptions that no longer match reality. Have you ever felt like you were playing a game where everyone else knew the rules except you? Marcus's confusion began where it does for most men, with the gap between what he was told would work and what actually worked in practice. Raised to believe that kindness, reliability, and emotional availability were the primary qualities women sought in partners, he had built his entire approach to dating around being the good guy who would treat women with respect and consideration. Yet, Marcus repeatedly watched women choose men who seemed less considerate, less emotionally available, and less focused on their comfort and happiness. This wasn't about women making bad choices. It was about Marcus fundamentally misunderstanding the psychological mechanisms that drive attraction and relationship formation. Peterson's research into evolutionary psychology reveals that attraction operates on multiple levels simultaneously. While women do value kindness and reliability, these qualities are essential for long-term partnership, they also respond to psychological cues that signal strength, independence, and what psychologists call reproductive fitness. The tragedy that Marcus was living out is common among modern men. He had been taught to optimize for only one aspect of attraction while remaining completely ignorant of the others. It's like trying to build a house while only understanding carpentry but knowing nothing about electrical work, plumbing, or foundation construction. Marcus had mastered being safe, predictable, and non-threatening. He was excellent at emotional support, remembering important dates and being available whenever needed. These are genuinely valuable qualities, but when they exist without their psychological counterparts, confidence, independence, and the ability to create excitement and challenge, they often fail to generate the complex emotional responses that sustain romantic interest. Peterson emphasizes that this isn't about women being shallow or men needing to become jerks. It's about understanding that human psychology evolved over millions of years and still responds to certain patterns and behaviors at an unconscious level, regardless of what our conscious minds believe we should find attractive. The confusion deepens because many women themselves don't fully understand their own psychological responses to different types of male behavior. They may genuinely believe they want the nice, accommodating guy, and they may even consciously choose him, but find themselves losing interest over time without understanding why. Marcus began to recognize this pattern in his own relationships. Women were initially drawn to his kindness and emotional availability, but over time, he noticed their interest would gradually fade. They would become less responsive, less excited to see him, less engaged in conversations. Eventually, they would end things with explanations that rarely made complete sense. "You're amazing, but I'm not ready for a relationship right now. We're just too different." The psychological truth that Peterson's research illuminates is that attraction requires what he calls productive tension, a dynamic balance between comfort and challenge, safety and excitement, predictability and surprise. Marcus had optimized entirely for comfort and safety while eliminating all sources of challenge and excitement from his personality. This realization was initially devastating. Marcus felt like he had been lied to by everyone who had given him relationship advice. His mother, his female friends, romantic comedies, dating articles, all had emphasized the importance of being nice, supportive, and emotionally available. None had mentioned the equally important need to maintain independence, create challenge, or demonstrate strength. Can you think of a relationship where everything seemed perfect on paper, but somehow lacked that indefinable spark that keeps people engaged? Peterson's work reveals that modern culture has created a psychological double-bind for men. They're told that traditional masculine traits like assertiveness, independence, and competitive drive are toxic and should be suppressed. Simultaneously, they're expected to somehow remain attractive to women who, at an unconscious level, still respond to confident, independent, psychologically strong men. The solution isn't to become callous or manipulative. It's to understand that healthy masculinity involves integrating apparently contradictory qualities. The most attractive men are those who can be both strong and gentle, independent and committed, challenging and supportive. They've learned to express their masculine energy in ways that create excitement without causing harm. Marcus began studying the psychology of attraction more seriously, not to manipulate women, but to understand the complex dynamics he had been unconsciously participating in. He discovered that many of his assumptions about what women wanted were based on what they said they wanted, not necessarily what they responded to emotionally. For example, Marcus had always been immediately available when women texted him, believing this showed interest and consideration. But Peterson's research suggests that immediate availability often signals low value. If someone is always free, it implies they don't have much else going on in their life worth prioritizing. This doesn't mean playing games or being intentionally difficult. It means having a genuine life full of purpose, goals, and activities that matter to you. When you have genuine priorities beyond romantic relationships, your natural availability patterns communicate value and independence without any conscious manipulation. Marcus realized he had fallen into what psychologists call the nice guy trap, organizing his entire life around being available for and pleasing women, while neglecting the personal development and independent pursuits that would have made him genuinely attractive. His niceness wasn't authentic kindness. It was a strategy for earning approval that actually communicated neediness and lack of options. The transformation required rebuilding his life around his own goals and values rather than his desire for female approval. Marcus began pursuing interests he had abandoned, setting boundaries he had previously avoided, and developing the kind of independent strength that doesn't need constant validation from others. Peterson emphasizes that this process is fundamentally about becoming a more complete human being, not about becoming more effective at attracting women. The man who develops genuine confidence, pursues meaningful goals, maintains his independence, and refuses to compromise his values becomes attractive as a side effect of his personal development, not as its primary goal. The irony that Marcus discovered, and that Peterson's research consistently demonstrates, is that the less desperately you need romantic validation, the more likely you are to receive genuine romantic interest. Women are drawn to men who seem to have options and choices because these qualities signal high value and psychological health. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent to relationships or treating women poorly. It means approaching relationships from a position of strength rather than need, offering genuine value rather than seeking to extract validation, and maintaining your own identity and goals rather than losing yourself in the pursuit of someone else's approval. Marcus's dating life transformed as he internalized these principles. Instead of organizing dates around what he thought women wanted to do, he invited them into activities he genuinely enjoyed. Instead of agreeing with everything they said, he expressed his authentic opinions, even when they differed. Instead of being available whenever they wanted to see him, he maintained a schedule based on his own priorities and invited them to fit into his life rather than reorganizing his life around them. The results were dramatic and initially confusing. Women began showing more interest, pursuing him more actively, and expressing genuine respect for his independence and strength. The very behaviors he had feared would drive women away actually made him more attractive to them. Have you ever noticed how the relationships where you cared the least seemed to work out the best, while the ones where you invested everything fell apart? Peterson's psychological framework helped Marcus understand that this wasn't manipulation or playing hard to get. It was the natural result of demonstrating psychological health and independence. When you have a life worth living, independent of romantic relationships, you naturally communicate confidence, purpose, and high value. The deeper psychological principle that Peterson identifies is what he calls hierarchical thinking. Humans unconsciously evaluate potential partners based on their position in various social and psychological hierarchies. The man who has his life together, pursues meaningful goals, maintains strong boundaries, and demonstrates competence naturally signals high hierarchical position. This isn't about money or status symbols, it's about psychological positioning. The man who knows what he wants, pursues it consistently, doesn't compromise his values for approval, and maintains his independence, communicates high value regardless of his external circumstances. Marcus learned that modern dating often involves unconscious psychological testing. Women don't consciously decide to test men's boundaries or independence, but they naturally respond more positively to men who demonstrate strength, consistency, and the ability to maintain their own direction under pressure. When Marcus had been the accommodating nice guy, he was unconsciously failing these tests. When women would cancel plans at the last minute, he would immediately accommodate and reschedule. When they would create drama or emotional turbulence, he would rush to fix it and make them feel better. When they would push against his boundaries or preferences, he would immediately compromise to avoid conflict. Each accommodation, while seeming kind and considerate, actually communicated psychological weakness and low value. It suggested that he didn't have better options, stronger priorities, or the confidence to maintain his own position when challenged. Peterson's research reveals that healthy relationships require both partners to maintain their psychological strength and independence. The relationship between two weak people seeking completion through each other is fundamentally unstable. The relationship between two strong people choosing to share their strength creates a stable foundation for long-term partnership. Marcus's transformation wasn't about becoming callous or manipulative. It was about developing genuine psychological strength and independence. He learned to be kind from a position of strength rather than pleasing from a position of weakness. He became supportive without losing himself, caring without becoming needy, interested without becoming desperate. The man who has built a life worth living, who knows his own value, who maintains his independence and pursues his goals, consistently becomes naturally attractive because these qualities signal psychological health and genetic fitness at an unconscious level. Peterson emphasizes that this understanding doesn't diminish women or reduce them to simple psychological equations. Women are complex human beings with their own goals, dreams, and psychological needs. But attraction, for both men and women, operates according to unconscious psychological principles that we ignore at our own peril. The goal isn't to manipulate these principles, but to align yourself with them through genuine personal development. When you become the kind of man who naturally demonstrates confidence, independence, purpose, and strength, you become attractive without any conscious effort to be attractive. Marcus discovered that the most profound change wasn't in how women responded to him, it was in how he felt about himself. When he stopped organizing his life around earning female approval and started building a life he was genuinely proud of, his entire sense of self-worth and confidence transformed. This internal transformation created what Peterson calls authentic confidence, not the performed confidence of the pickup artist trying to impress women, but the quiet strength of a man who knows his own value and doesn't need others to confirm it. The relationships that resulted from this transformation were qualitatively different from anything Marcus had experienced before. Instead of anxious, approval-seeking dynamics, he found himself in relationships with women who genuinely respected and appreciated his strength and independence. Peterson's ultimate insight is that the confusion and frustration many modern men experience in dating isn't due to personal inadequacy. It's due to operating with incomplete psychological understanding in a complex social environment. When you understand the psychological principles that actually drive attraction and relationship success, you can align your behavior with reality rather than fighting against it. The hidden psychology of modern relationships isn't about manipulating women or becoming someone you're not. It's about becoming the most authentic, strong, and psychologically healthy version of yourself. The man who achieves this transformation attracts women not through tricks or strategies, but through the natural magnetism of genuine confidence and independence. If this resonates with your own experience in modern dating, if you felt confused by the gap between what you were told would work and what actually works, you're not alone. Share this with someone who needs to understand these psychological principles. Subscribe to join a community of men committed to genuine self-improvement rather than approval-seeking. Like this video if you believe that understanding psychology is the key to better relationships. Marcus's story represents the possibility available to any man willing to do the difficult work of genuine self-development. The goal isn't to become perfect or to never face rejection again. It's to become the kind of man who can handle rejection without losing his sense of self-worth, who can offer genuine value in relationships, and who attracts partners based on his authentic strength rather than his willingness to please. The psychological principles that Peterson has identified aren't about reducing women to simple formulas. They're about understanding the complex unconscious processes that influence all human relationships. When you align yourself with these principles through genuine personal development, you create the foundation for relationships based on mutual respect, attraction, and psychological health. Your confusion and frustration in modern dating isn't evidence of personal failure. It's evidence that you've been operating with incomplete information. The men who succeed in modern relationships aren't necessarily better than you. They simply understand psychological principles that you may have never been taught. The transformation from confused nice guy to genuinely attractive man isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming the strongest, most authentic version of yourself. The woman who will appreciate you isn't looking for someone who will cater to her every whim. She's looking for a man with the strength and independence to be a genuine partner. The hidden psychology of modern relationships can be learned, understood, and applied in ways that benefit everyone involved. When men understand what actually creates attraction and relationship success, they can pursue these goals through authentic self-development rather than manipulation or performance. The journey towards psychological understanding and genuine attractiveness is ongoing, but the rewards, both in relationships and in personal satisfaction, are worth every effort invested in becoming the man you're capable of being.